colleagues and fellow friends, good morning. Before we begin our inaugural function, I request all of you to keep your phone on silent mode. Welcome to the National Conference on Post-Colonial Studies, Issues, Problems, Prospect in Post-Colonialism, conducted by the Department of English, Mangalore University. To begin with the inaugural function, I now request the head of the Department of English, Professor Parinita, to deliver the speech.
Welcome to all of you. As a department, we have been rather reclusive, immersed in our teaching and our research. I would not be exaggerating when I say that without the gentle but persistent prodding of our Vice Chancellor, this national conference would not have taken place. Not only did he encourage us to organize this conference, he also supported us in our task of finding sponsors for this conference. The department is especially grateful for the support from the Vice Chancellor and the generosity of our sponsors for this conference, Texer Power Solutions Private Limited. Conferences like these are an important and necessary part of the academia. They expand the boundaries of the classroom and open new possibilities of teaching and learning. In the routine of timetable learning, very often texts, knowledges, conceptual categories that were once new and exciting can become inert and repetitively parroted. As teachers, academicians, and students, we need to keep the excitement of learning alive. We need to wrest learning from the routines of the curriculum and the Procrustean frames of the academic structures and the regulations of teaching and evaluating. If learning is to become a process of moving astray of ourselves, we need to talk to the larger scholarly community. We need to have dialogues and arguments. We need to discover new texts and dismantle the familiar. And a conference, we believe, does this. We took this conference as an opportunity to revisit a critique and a text that languaged this critique. The text is Orientalism by Edward Said, which burst into the academic horizon in 1978. This text provided a language and a perspective for critiquing Western cultural representations of the East that legitimized and justified the colonial and imperial ambitions of European powers. As Said writes in the introduction to his book, I quote, "My contention is that without examining Orientalism as a discourse, one cannot possibly understand the enormously systemic discipline by which European culture was able to manage and even produce the Orient politically, sociologically, militarily, ideologically, scientifically, and imaginatively during the post-Enlightenment period. Moreover, so authoritative a position did Orientalism have that I believe no one writing, thinking, or acting on the Orient could do so without taking account of the limitations on thought and action imposed by Orientalism. In brief, because of Orientalism, the Orient was not and is not a free subject of thought or action. This is not to say that Orientalism unilaterally determines what can be said about the Orient, but that it is the whole network of interests inevitably brought to bear and therefore always involved in any occasion when the peculiar entity, the Orient, is in question." I close quotes. Said's book provided a language to speak about the politics of culture and an optic through which to read the canonical texts of English literature. Said's book also elicited a whole range of responses that explored the limitations of its critique of Orientalism. The corpus of critical responses to Said's book illustrates the process by which theory grapples with changing practices of power and the ways in which theory is nuanced through dialogue and interrogation. We hope that our conference will continue this dialogue and contribute to it. In these 2 days, we look forward to exciting and creative dialogues between students, teachers, and scholars from different disciplines who are active in their research and who are participating as readers or writers in the influential public spheres of the present. We decided to spend these 2 days in listening and talking to each other. And we are happy that so many of you decided to come to the conference and participate in it, despite the fact that we have made no provision for adding to your API scores. The mad scramble for API scores has changed the very nature of our conferences. Papers are written in frenetic speeds and delivered at equally frenetic speeds. We decided that we would do away with this hurry. Many old friends are with us today, and we hope to make many new ones. Convention, and more importantly, a feeling of gratitude, demands that we welcome those guests who have been very significant in contributing to this conference with a token of our gratitude. We decided that we would dispense with the usual offering of flowers and give our guests a gift that would fit into the theme of our conference. Hence, we will be offering them an 18th century text titled Radhika Santvanam, translated as The Appeasement of Radhika. This text was originally written in Telugu by the accomplished and learned courtesan Muddupalani under the patronage of King Pratapavarma of the Thanjavur court. In 1910, when Bangalore Nagaratnamma, another accomplished courtesan, reprinted it, it came under the scrutiny of colonial censorship, and the colonial government charged the publishers of Nagaratnamma's book with having published an obscene book and banned the book. The ban on the book was lifted with the winning of independence. But when the editors Susi Tharu and K. Lalitha of another path-breaking text, Women Writing in India, tried to get a copy of Radhika Santvanam in the late 1980s, they found it difficult to find one. As they write in the introduction to their book, I quote again, "The misadventures of Muddupalani's text display the process through which cultural authorities are fashioned and secured as they were drafted into the merging historical projects of empire and nation." Close quotes. Imperial interests informed the fashioning of a new literary canon and a new set of sexual mores, especially for women, and a new structuring of gender. The instituting of English studies in Indian universities played a major role in this process of sanitizing Indian culture, which demanded the rejection of texts like Radhika Santvanam, which were seen as markers of a reprehensible and immoral civilization. Today, when we present an English translation of this book to our guests, we are conscious of this history and the ways in which our discipline is embedded in this history. But we think of ourselves as Calibans who speak back to Prospero in his language, contesting its power to write our histories and constitute our subjectivities. We too found it difficult to get copies of this text, especially 8 copies of this text, but these difficulties are part of the post-colonial world in which we live today. Once again, I extend a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the Department of English and on behalf of Mangalore University. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Professor Ravi Shankar Rao to present Dr. Paul Jenkins, the inaugurator of this conference, with a copy of the book. I invite Professor R. Shashidhar to present Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan, the keynote speaker of this conference, with a copy of the book. I invite Professor Kishori Nayak to present Professor K. Bhairappa, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mangalore University, with a copy of the book. Thank you, everyone.
Dr. Paul Jenkins has been one of the central figures in the development of African studies, especially research and teaching on African history in Basel. He is Research Associate in the Department of History and Center for African Studies, University of Basel, Switzerland. He works to promote improved accessibility to the holdings of the Basel Mission Archive. From 1972 to his retirement in 2003, he was a member of the staff of the Basel Mission at the headquarters in Basel, where he served as the head of the Basel Mission Archive. Since 2003, he has continued to work as a private scholar on the history of Basel Mission in the context of social and intellectual history of Ghana and Cameroon. He has added to this geographically by also looking at its work in the state of Karnataka and Kerala in South India. He has been co-supervisor for a number of doctoral theses in history. He has been the recipient of the annual Cantonal Academic Prize of Basel III and was awarded an honorary doctorate by the Theological Faculty of the University of Basel. His scholarly publication focused on the history of Basel Mission, the history of Ghana, the history of Christianity in Africa and Asia, and on the use of photographs as historical sources. He has been part of the Karnataka Theological Research Institute, Balmata, Mangalore, as its external research associate. We are indeed privileged to have a scholar of such commitment and knowledge as the inaugurator and research person of this conference. Now, I gladly to invite Dr. Paul Jenkins to deliver the inaugural speech.
Professor Parinita, colleagues and friends, and I'm very moved, I'm very moved and grateful to be invited to come to speak at the University of Mangalore. In my time of working with India, I have experienced many conversations, critical, interested, open-minded, with people in the University of Mangalore who have different religious identities, and conversations about the history of the Basel Mission. The person who really inspired me to take up Indian studies as far as I could, as an old man, I'm almost finished with my professional life, was Professor Srinivas Habanur, who was Professor of Kannada here in the university. So the University of Mangalore has a very positive profile for me, and I'm very grateful and very honored to be here. I have perhaps one problem with what I'm going to say. I am a historian, but I understand that many of you are scholars of literature. So if my word historian slips into my speech, please don't feel that you're excluded. I'm really talking about intellectuals and the intellectual task in our world. I'm going to start with a truism, but I'm confident that I'm surrounded by people who many of us outsiders call argumentative Indians, to quote that book title, so that things will not go peacefully in the next couple of days, I hope. Nevertheless, my truism is that the human race has always lived not only by observing with its five senses, but by storing experience in the memory of individuals and assessing that experience and developing it. And then this goes on into the social sphere, the assessment and the development of experience as memory is one of the things which is absolutely central to all human cultures. Our modern disciplines dealing with the past are the continuation at a generalized meaning, at a generalized community level of the process of recalling experience and assessing its meaning. The modern investment in the training and production of people who work with the past has many links to the whole of life as we live it, but has as its central significance the insight that if a nation's sense of history is poorly developed or illusory, it may make out of a national difficulty a national catastrophe. I grew up during the Second World War when that was a really great issue in Britain and on the continent of Europe. And if you like, I am now, as a Briton living on the continent of Europe, a potential sufferer under Brexit. So the quality of our discussion about the past is not just an academic matter. In a healthy culture, it links right back into the conduct of politics. And the content of post-colonial studies and the priority we give them and the conclusions we draw from them are really of vital importance. In my experience, though, in and on the edge of academia, one of the things which worries me most about our concern with the past is the role of fashion in our professions. The way that what we call in Switzerland Seilschaften plays such a big role in people's careers. Seilschaften, that's the people roped together who are climbing a rock face and helping each other. My heart warmed perceptibly as I read in the plans for this conference a couple of phrases about Orientalism. Orientalism, for me, has become one of those fashions with unfortunate effects. Its initial launch was correct and justified, but it came to be the thing everyone seemed to be doing, and a whole genre of writing sprouted from the original impulse given by Edward Said, with, I'm quoting the abstract at the beginning of the conference planning, with innumerable theses written by scholars who, from my point of view, and I think from the point of view of the human race and human history, would really have been better employed, not so much making ever deeper assessments of Western cliches about the non-Western world, but analysing concrete situations with anthropological astringency, gaining the ability to be eloquent in non-Western languages, and understanding other people's eloquences as well. If Orientalism diverted resources which could have been applied to the study of non-Western languages, then it has a part in that fatal asymmetry which I am always experiencing between speaking two languages, which many other people can speak back to me in, with varying degrees of skill, often a high skill, but where I don't understand the languages that they're speaking, neither in Canton province in China earlier this year, or nowadays here in Karnataka. Language, that brings me to the possibility in this conference that we can cite that famous English quip about two peoples divided by a common language. I fear the term post-colonial, which I'm sure has quite clear meanings in your ears, sounds ambiguous to me. Does it mean that we are at last liberated from the chains of concentrating on imperial history, or the history of resistance to imperialism? Does it mean giving Kannadiga history and culture the importance of profile which I suspect in India Bengal has already attained? Or does it mean to suggest that in spite of our formally post-colonial situation, one is arguing that we must make sure that colonial analyses of your history and ours remain a central part of our historical consciousness? I'd hate, of course, to be pigeonholed as an apologist for colonialism, and if I may make a personal remark, I began working in Ghana, in West Africa, shortly after independence, and I had my head washed at least once a week as a young man, as the successor of the colonialist who'd caused all the trouble that the Ghanaian people were complaining about. But practically, in terms of our current priorities, it seems to me that the colonial critical side of post-colonial studies needs now to be focused clearly on the present day. My heart beats for the people you turn up if you Google muckraking 21st century. My heart beats for people like the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, for the international network of engaged journalists who are nowadays linked to papers like The Guardian and other papers which have produced some sensations which have put selfish and corrupt wealth on the spot, like the recent Panama Papers. Yes, our mutual colonial past is still important, but it's far away from the kind of racial-based hierarchies which we had to do with in those old days. And to my mind, following and unmasking the implications of new communications technology in a globalized world, in many ways controlled by the 1% or the 5% or the 10%, that is infinitely more important, a real lifeification for our best students than too much churning of the old past. However, I do stand to my experience in the University of Ghana in the 1960s. I may have had my head washed regularly. I may have been only an immigrant worker, marking dozens of essays on world history every week. But I was touched by the hem of the garment of a multiracial group capable of working in many different languages and working to free African history from the trammels of colonial history, to make African history first and foremost the history of African states, the history of African communities, the history of African identities. And if we talk about history as the study of change and continuity, those studies they were attempting to push those studies of the situation in Ghana and the region around it back into the pre-colonial period, so that we, who were experiencing every day in our interactions with people, understood the parts of their lives which we didn't understand and what the historical depth was behind that. So I was, yes, not happy as a new fashion took over in my old university of leaving the cause of what we now call localism and regionalism and returning to an examination of Western colonialism, Western imperialism. And I was sad too that the development of departments of African studies in Western universities, however justified they were in some terms, meant that many, many talented indigenous intellectuals succumbed to the temptation of becoming NRHs, NRIs, non-resident historians, non-resident intellectuals, working in a very different intellectual environment from that at home, far from the complexities of the very cultural roots it was their calling and my conviction to explore, to research, to document and present to the world. I began with a truism about the human brain, confident, as I said, that in this famously argumentative India, we'll not spend 2 cozy days in our comfort zone, looking back and exchanging truths with no cutting edge. I wish us all personally in this conference the experience of finding an enlightening positioning, a basis for the priority research and thinking we would like to pursue as life goes on. Maybe evolving through post-colonial studies out of the history of imperialism, maybe galvanized into action by a true intellectual revolution, by an intellectual process of going back in new ways to our own history and its fascination. I wish us all the courage we need to think uncomfortable thoughts, and I wish us all the insights we need to take our calling seriously as historians, as intellectuals, in our varied and increasingly problematic political environments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenkins, for the deep insight you have provided to the meaning and importance of the term post-colonial studies and for inaugurating this conference. Professor K. Bhairappa, the Honorable Vice-Chancellor of Mangalore University, has a PhD from Moscow State University, Moscow. He has held several important positions, including that of Chairman, Department of Earth Sciences, University of Mysore, and UGC Academic Staff College, University of Mysore. And he is the founder, coordinator of MTech in Material Science Center for Material Science and Technology. He has been the principal investigator of several research projects sponsored by the Department of Science and Technology, New Delhi, Department of Atomic Energy, University Grants Commission, Council of Scientific Industrial Research, Defense Research Development Organization, and major industries like General Electric USA, Johnson & Johnson Co. USA, Siemens Germany, MR Jain Gem Company India. Professor Bhairappa successfully completed a major joint research project of US 1.2 million as coordinator of hydrothermal carbon with Professor M. Yoshimura of Tokyo Institute of Technology, Japan, as investigator funded by the Research Institute of Solvothermal Technology, Takamatsu, Japan. He trained several of his colleagues and research students in Japan under this program. He has been awarded many distinctions and fellowships. He was elected Fellow Academician, World Academy of Ceramics, Italy, USA from 2009 and appointed Senior Associated Editor, the journal Progress in Crystal Growth and Characterization of Materials, a review journal from Elsevier Science published under Netherlands. He has been on the editorial board of distinguished national and international journals and held important positions in various international organizations. His contribution to the field of science has been recognized regionally, nationally, and internationally. He received the Dr. Raja Ramanna Award for Science and Technology in 2011. This is the highest state award for science education. And Sir C.V. Raman Award in Physical Science for the year 1998. Professor Bhairappa has been listed in Mark's Who's Who in the World USA, Mark's Who's Who in Asia, Mark's Who's Who in Science and Engineering from 1997 onwards. Above all, he has been a very dynamic Vice-Chancellor, showing sensitivity to the academic and infrastructural needs of the university. The many gardens that have been laid out on the university campus after his taking over as Vice-Chancellor have contributed to the natural beauty of the campus. He also initiated the establishment of the International Student Center, This has led to the arrival of students from different parts of the world, which in turn has enhanced the cultural academic life of the campus. He has always encouraged academic activities and supported any event that contributes to the development of the university. He has been a source of great support and in organizing this conference. I invite the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mangalore University, Professor K. Bhairappa, to give away the presidential remarks.
Thank you, Diksha Shetty, for the nice introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Paul Jenkins from the University of Basel, Switzerland, Dr. A.V. Ramakrishnan, Professor Emeritus from the School of Language from the Central University of Gujarat, and we have Professor Parinita Shetty, and dignitaries of the dais, my esteemed colleagues from the Department of English and other sister departments, and the invitees, invited speakers, participants, and the students and media persons. I am thrilled to be a part of this National Conference on Post-Colonial Studies, Issues, Problems and Prospects in Post-Colonialism, organized by the Department of Studies in English, Mangalore University. After several years, the department has revived its activities in a big way, and I am very happy about it. And Professor Parinita took the lead in organizing this important conference, national conference, on a topic very relevant for the students of literature. As you know, the literature actually began with the human evolution. It is very old, and from the earliest days it has evolved through the medieval and the recent times. Literature is not just a fiction or storytelling, and maybe for others it looks like just story reading, or novel is nothing but some story, and or some fiction taking you to a different world. But actually it involves around our day-to-day life, and it covers several other branches of science, arts, humanities, social science, and including subjects like economics, history, political science. And in the recent or in the current sense, literature is a highly interdisciplinary subject. I am very glad that Professor Parinita has invited Paul Jenkins, who is not from the Department of English, and as he mentioned in his inaugural speech, that he is not from the literature field, but from the Department of History. And he also cited his works from his experience working in Africa, particularly Ghana, at the University of Ghana. And this is very important, very relevant in the modern day literature, to look into the perspectives from different angles, from different subjects. So this is the reason why even a lot of scientists go back to literature during the free time. Well, we do have in India serious literature, particularly after the post-independence period. But still, compared to what the African literature has given to the world, we are really lagging behind in that sense. We haven't produced, after the independence, Nobel laureates in literature. But look at Africa and even the Middle East, countries like Algeria, Egypt, and African countries like Caribbean, Nigeria. All these countries have given to world quite a few Nobel laureates. To quote, we have Ole Soyinka, Derek Walcott, and we have from Algeria, Camus Albert, and even from Egypt, Mahfouz Naguib, so many others. And also the literature, if you look into, Africa has given a wonderful literature. The contemporary literature, particularly from Africa, is very rich. That is purely based on the experience, the human struggle. Although India has a great history, particularly for science, the science began in India from the Vedic period, about 5,000 years ago. And you take any field, of course, India comes first. In the literature, although we have the ancient Indian literature, that was more idealistic and it didn't really attract the attention of the world compared to what the other countries have given. And today, people look into more the literature giving the actual human experience, struggle. Language is only just a mode of communication or a medium of communication or to express your feelings. So one should not confine only to his mother tongue or his language of the country, but also one should look into the literature available in the other parts of the world. So translation is a very important issue in modern literature. Many people do not accept translation as research, but I feel it is a serious research because the translator has to understand the mind of the author. Then only he can give the real translation and the real fiction he can or he or she can give to the readers. So many people have missed the best literature available in the other parts of the world. I always admire the Progress Publishers, a very famous publication company in Moscow. Its main job was to bring literature from other parts of the world, the best literature available, and translate into the Russian language and sell to or offer to its nationals at subsidized price so that the people from Russia could read the other literature from other parts of the world almost free of cost. So literature, without literature, there is no life, I would say. And man is nothing but a machine without looking into or without reading the literature, because that gives everything, the culture, the society, the struggle, the human experience, the history, economics, political science. Everything is seen in literature. And the comparative literature is picking up fast, and the Commonwealth literature in particular is very attractive. In India, people do a lot of research in Commonwealth literature and comparative literature. That is how many Indian students are exposed to the best literature coming from African continent. And what I feel, the teachers who teach English literature should also train the students not just in criticism but also in creative writing. So read the autobiography of the best writers and how they started, how they took writing, particularly creative writing. The best example is Googie, when he was a student in England. So that is the best experience, how he got into serious literature, creative writing. So I thank the Department of English for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share some of my feelings or thoughts with the students of literature or the researchers of literature. Thank you very much. I wish you good luck in these next 2 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor K. Bhairappa, for your encouraging words and for the presidential remarks. I now invite Professor Kishori Nayak, Professor in the Department of English, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Honorable President of today's function, Vice Chancellor Professor K. Bhairappa, dignitaries on the dais, dignitaries off the dais, friends, students, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to propose the formal vote of thanks. As Dr. Parinita said right at the beginning, this seminar would not have taken off but for the constant prodding of our beloved Vice Chancellor, and we thank him for having created this opportunity for us to organize this function. He also looked into the finances. One of the problems that the English department has always faced with regard to organizing seminars has been finance, and he has been a very efficient administrator in that sense by making provision. English being an alien language in a certain sense, and we in the English department always feel a little alienated from mainstream Kannada and other concerns. This being the case, finance and mainstreaming English studies in a certain sense into the Karnataka state and such other things. These have been some of our problems, and that is why we have always been thinking of post-colonial studies. This has probably been one of the reasons that we have organized seminars maybe once in a decade. I think it was 89, after which we had an international conference in 2005. In 2013, Dr. Ravi Shankar Rao organized a Canadian workshop, and now with your generous provisioning, we were able to organize this seminar. So thank you very much, sir, and thanks to Tech Sir, which has sponsored a major part of our expenses. I would also like to thank the speakers who have agreed to come over and deliver their lectures. Professor Paul Jenkins and his wife Jennifer Jenkins for gracing this function. Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan for agreeing to come over and give us the keynote. Professor Valerian Rodriguez, Professor Emeritus in the Political Science Department, one of our own, but for sparing time from his research to speak to us. Professor Meena Pillai from Trivandrum, similarly Professor Chandan Gowda from Bangalore, who is expected to arrive tomorrow morning, and Professor Chitra Panikar from Bangalore, who's been a frequent visitor to the department in several capacities. So all these will be speaking to us over the next 2 days, and we are happy that they have all made it to come over, made time to come over here. I'd like to thank the members of the press for coming over to give coverage to our seminar. I would like to thank the Devendra, who's organizing the acoustics. I would like to thank our students. I would like to thank Sartika and Diksha, who have been the masters of ceremony. I would like to thank our students who have been part of organizing in terms of reception, setting up the hall, and so many other things. I would like to thank in particular our research scholars, Ms. Varsha and Ms. Akshita, who have been, I think, the ones who have planned each and every, detail of the organizing, along with, of course, Dr. Parinita and the staff, Gopi and Manjunath, for having assisted us in so many different ways. I would like to thank Dr. Parinita for the effort she has put in to, present the department in this seminar. And also I should not I should not forget the caterers and such other people. Of course, Dr. Parinita will be giving a further vote of thanks, but she said that I must make the vote of thanks quite full, and I hope I have covered everybody. Thank you.